Okay, welcome Cyberweek 2019 attendees. Thank you so much for attending this session with my very good friend Amy Schmitz. Amy and I go way back. I can't even think, maybe more than 10 years, probably.
Back in the galaxies, far away.
Yeah, I chose this background because Amy liked it. She says it makes her think I look like Major Tom, so that's cool. I'm sort of floating in zero gravity. But Amy and I co-wrote a book called The New Handshake, Online Dispute Resolution and the Future of Consumer Protection. And I think she's the best. And I'm really excited about this presentation. Amy led on an article we did together, talked about smart contract online dispute resolution. And she's spending a lot more time these days thinking about smart contracts and blockchain and artificial intelligence and bleeding edge stuff. So that's what she's going to talk about in this session. So Amy, thank you so much for doing it.
Well, thanks for having me. So as we start off, I want to kind of get us to, why did it suddenly?
What are you doing? You lost your screen share? Oh, here it comes.
There we go.
I see it. Yep,
all right.
Perfect.
So what I'm looking at today, I also teach contracts, and so it's kind of fun to think at the intersections of dispute resolution and contract. And in fact, even in working with the amazing Colin Rule, we were looking at, how contracts matter in the world of dispute resolution, and of course with ODR being a matter of contract in a lot of cases, especially with its beginnings at eBay and PayPal. Well, smart contracts are interesting because they're not really contracts. The question is, are they contracts, and are they really smart? Not necessarily, right? So as we begin, and a lot of you probably know about the rise of blockchain, and looking at Bitcoin, and there are now over 1,600 cryptocurrencies. We also have the growth of Ethereum and distributed ledgers of all sorts and kinds. What's really interesting is there's also been a mainstreaming of smart contracts with Rocket Lawyer and law firms partnering with different blockchain companies. And in fact, with the help of oracles like Chainlink, you can actually make smart contracts accessible and usable without having cryptocurrencies. Also, we have corporate funding. In 2018 alone, you had 2.1 billion, and that's only in 2018. I'm sure that's much more today. Dramatic increase also, I tell my students, in hiring and in jobs related to blockchain and understanding what it is. So what is blockchain? I mean, if I really think about it, to me, blockchain is really a matter of trust. It's really a new system for building trust. And really, in some ways, it's sort of like a letter of credit or secure transactions if you work in that area and you're thinking about the Uniform Commercial Code. Well, if you can use blockchain as the basis for a smart contract, it can build trust in a trustless world, right? You can even be building trust among strangers. What's interesting about blockchain is also, of course, is it relies on a distributed ledger. The idea is that there's one version of a database record on many computers, right? It's all over the world. They're located in all different places. If you were at the ODR forum in Williamsburg, we had some really nice sort of views of that where Chris Draper and Angie Raymond talked about that and talked about trust and where all these blockchain developments occur and how do you build trust in blockchain. And in fact, they may even be presenting as part of Cyberweek.
They are, yeah. Chris is presenting tomorrow.
Nice. Okay, well, he will fill you in on the rest. But they're trusted, basically because they can't be changed. The idea of it being immutable. We also know that in a blockchain environment, if it's a public blockchain, it's trusted because it's transparent, but yes, private, right? Data and integrity, it can be used for identity authentication. So there are a lot of reasons why we look to blockchain to perhaps address different questions with respect to trust. Again, thinking about core concepts of a public chain as opposed to a private and permissioned chain. So you look at it, it has distributed ledger. Again, no central authority to hold the ledger to be attacked. I always think about it, there's not one castle that can be stormed, and once you get in there, you've got all the information right there at your fingertips, a la sort of Equifax or any other major security breach where it's all located in one place. That can be dangerous. The idea of a transparent but anonymous ledger, because it can be public. You can watch the ledger in real time. However, if it's used with a private key, then that, of course, keeps the privacy of the holder Also, append-only ledger, what does that mean? That just means that any entry is linked to the previous entry via very, very complex algorithms that you would need a supercomputer to be able to break those, but which is called a hash. Some nodes, which are called miners, are basically paid for performing the calculations, which is the proof of work in the case of blockchain. The idea of the immutable ledger also means that attacks to the ledger are really difficult. I'm not going to say impossible because we know it's already happened, but it's impractical. It's very unlikely due to the need for the majority of nodes, meaning over 51% would have to be attacked to agree to a change, and the computational power required to do that is, of course, very, very robust. Some examples, of course, we have Bitcoin, which employs the blockchain model. We also have smart contracts, which we're going to be talking about shortly. Certainly, blockchain, maybe it's not, it's the bright shiny new toy. Maybe it's not really as great as it's sort of, and it's probably not sufficiently mature right now to be what everybody says it could be originally. But nonetheless, it has disrupted a lot of different areas. So, for example, in the shipping industry, in fact, I would say supply chain and shipping is probably an area where blockchain has the most promise, and smart contracts can be incredibly beneficial. An example is the Belt and Road Initiative in Hong Kong. Also, finance banks are seeking security through use of blockchain technology, again, because of it being a distributed ledger and the enhanced security that's created. Also, records, Estonia and India are two examples where records and public records are being placed in the blockchain. In fact, also, this isn't on here, but even evidentiary submissions for the Hangzhou Internet Court, they're using blockchain technology in order to ensure the authenticity of evidence that is submitted to the court. Also, with respect to healthcare, securing and tracking data is another area. And of course, again, smart contracts. And now Libra has come on scene as a possibility. Libra, of course, is the quote unquote stable coin that is being proposed by Facebook. Of course, we don't know whether or not it'll be approved, but the idea is there. And there's some folks that really feel excited about Libra and how it might actually transform. Really, it's kind of it's a whole new payment system through Facebook that could create a whole new marketplace based on smart contracts, 100% smart contracts. So again, what is it? Well, it's a set of coded computer functions that can incorporate it doesn't have to, but it is possible for it to incorporate the elements of a binding contract, as my poor students are getting ready for finals and learning all about offer acceptance and consideration. But not all smart contracts are contracts at all. It might be computer code that is built on just executing certain terms of a contract, or just a gift, or not even enforceable at all. Maybe it's illegal what underlines the code. Basically, it's just an execution format based on computer code to take actions at specified times and /or based on reference to the occurrence or non-occurrence of an action or event. It could be anything: delivery of an asset, weather conditions, a change in a reference rate, a stock price, sells at a certain time, anything. It can be based on other objective third-party data, which of course creates vulnerabilities in the blockchain, because then you're relying on information and data that is actually not part of the chain and can be brought in via an oracle, such as the town crier, which is one that a lot of people have heard about. Where did all this come from? In 1994, we have Nick Szabo, a legal scholar and cryptographer. He realized this distributed ledger could be used for smart contracts. That's kind of where it came from. Again, the idea is that it'll be almost like a vending machine. People sort of laugh like they're sick of that explanation, but for me, it helps wrap my brain around it and thinking about sort of the vending machine mentality, right? So if then, you put your quarters in, and if you chose the Twinkies, you're stuck with the Twinkies. You can't change it. Once you put your quarters in and you push Twinkies, you're stuck, right? And you can like pound all you want on the glass, but it's immutable. There's nothing you can do. You're stuck with the Twinkies. And that's kind of the idea of a smart contract, where there's an automatic payment system set in. And ideally, if you're a crypto I can't even say it, crypto economist. I know.
Crypto economist.
Yeah, crypto economist. And I said it just fine in class today, and now I'm like, my tongue is tied. That'll happen when you teach class directly from 2 o'clock all the way through until 6. Your tongue gets a little tired. Anyway, automatic payment systems, the idea is that you get rid of lawyers, you get rid of courts, you get rid of all of that, right? And you trust the math. That's the idea. Some of the main things you think about are digital signatures, which are private cryptographic keys that are held by each party. Again, that allows you to really hide your identity behind this cryptographic key. Oracles, as I mentioned earlier, are very important when it comes to smart contracts because that's the network authenticated reference data provider. And that is where vulnerabilities usually come in with respect to smart contracts and their execution. Benefits: speed and efficiency, autonomy, the idea you don't have to rely on courts or lawyers or law. That's the idea, at least. The hope, the plan is that you will have no disputes, right? So let's say you're in a shipping smart contract and the boat gets there, it gets to Hong Kong, and that is tracked all in real time as it's going, it's kind of traveling from California to Hong Kong, and it's sort of following along, and all of that is transparent as you're following the ledger as it gets from point A to point B. And when it gets to the ultimate buyer, then automatic payment should happen. And you don't have to worry about lawyers, you don't have to worry about trust, you know the money is there, and that is kind of the hope and the dream. Well, some other examples: sharing economy. Again, as I said, supply chain, another sort of a new area with respect to supply chain that's got some people quite excited, is the idea that with supply chain, and if you use a distributed ledger that is transparent in that manner, then you can actually track where exactly that food came from. So for example, if you find out that there's tainted turkeys, right? And it's right before Halloween, right before Thanksgiving, so we're worried about the turkeys. So let's say that somebody gets sick from turkeys. Well, if you had that within a distributed ledger that was transparent in real time, then you could right away figure out where exactly it came from, and you would be able to sort of shut down that particular food supply and perhaps help with food security in that way in a much more efficient manner than we currently have, with sort of waiting until you kind of get rid of everything on the shelves and you put up signs, and we do things in a very sort of old and archaic manner. And there might come a time where we can really sort of track food security using supply chain in the blockchain. As I mentioned earlier, financial services, telecoms, construction, insurance, there are a lot of different use cases that have been argued. But I will say with a caution that I say argued, but that doesn't mean necessarily that it's more efficient or better to throw everything in the blockchain, because in a lot of situations, it actually isn't. But in some, it can be quite beneficial. And there's no question that the efficiencies of not having to deal with letters of credit and secure transactions and bonding and a lot of different financial mechanisms can be very helpful in building trust in these kind of international deals, especially. Are they really contracts? The answer is it depends. It's algorithmic code, and really it's kind of unclear what the offer, acceptance, and consideration is. It's decentralized, so there's not really identifiable jurisdiction, which makes it awfully hard to sort of suss out and litigate in a court of law a smart contract dispute. Again, being anonymous, it's unclear who and where the parties are, and coding, that is a question for the statute of frauds. So why are we even talking about, and again, there's the private versus public. What do we mean by that? Permissionless, those are public. Transparent, example is Ethereum and Bitcoin. Permissioned, that's private, things like the Hyperledger Fabric. A lot of people talk about the permissioned and the private as really the area of growth, right? And things like Hyperledger Fabric as areas where there will be more growth. We're going to see more consortiums using the kind of permissioned blockchain. But that would sort of defeat the whole idea if you're a crypto economist, because it's supposed to be public and true to the libertarian cause. So there's kind of this inherent sort of, from a professor standpoint, there is an inherent friction there with respect to its use cases and its original underpinnings. But nonetheless, what we care about is the fact that disputes will develop. There's going to be issues with smart contracts. So again, going back to its beginning, there was this whole idea that, well, isn't this great? We're going to preclude any disputes. So it's perfect dispute prevention. In fact, we won't need dispute resolution because we are going to prevent all disputes by coding, right? We'll just do it, computer code, complete execution. We don't have to worry about issues. Well, that's just not logical. I mean, there's always going to be issues, there are always going to be problems, there always will be disputes. So what are some examples? Well, breach or failed performance. You could also have like coding errors or a mistake of fact. I was talking to a crypto economist and who really is a brilliant mathematician, and even he was saying that when it comes to computer code, even computer coders dispute computer code. So looking at the code itself, people have different interpretations of computer code depending on where they were trained, how they were trained. So the meaning behind it can actually be up for grabs. Remediation, what kind of remedy are you going to provide? What if you really want specific performance? What if you want cancellation? What if you want reversal? There's not a lot of room for sort of giving different remedies when it comes to smart contracts, especially because they're immutable. It's done. You got the Twinkie, you're stuck with it. You can't really jam the Twinkie back in the machine and try to get the M&Ms. Lack of capacity, that's a really good one to think about is, what if we've got like a 10-year-old who's engaging in smart contracts? Well, that's a problem, right? You could have incomplete contracts. Disputes could rise because of the inflexible self-execution. There might have, issues for exceptions or nuances in a given relationship. I spend months just talking about contract interpretation and different ways that people can read the exact same terms, or the different defenses that might arise that aren't really based on any objective data. In fact, there's a lot of equitable defenses to contracts as well. So a lot of equitable issues such as unconscionability could come up with respect to smart contract enforcement. Also, adjudicator expertise. So let's say you did want to take this to a court of law. How many judges are going to really be able to look behind the curtain and really understand what's going on with smart contracts? So there's a lot of issues with the issues, meaning we're going to have disputes, number one, and number two, it's going to be awfully impractical and imprudent to try to bring those to a court of law. So this leads us to wonder, and I know Orna, who I think she presented yesterday or this morning.
This morning.
Yeah, so she's talked about this a lot as well, is this the internet all over again? Who's in charge? Is it trust among strangers? Can technology even escape government regulation? Is self-regulation effective or possible? We're going from human third party to an automated fourth party as simply kind of taking care of things. Because, even smart contracts can enter into smart contracts. When I stop and I think about this, it kind of blows my mind a little bit, but I'm not surprised, right? So it's kind of that age-old question of sort of what started the whole thing rolling. And of course, when it comes to smart contracts, it gets pretty complicated once you get in the weeds. So how are you going to resolve all these different disputes? Well, Colin and I wrote about this in our article, and those who are interested in sort of learning more about these different blockchain systems, please check out the article that we put into the Journal of Dispute Resolution, and it's resolving smart contract disputes. So you can look at that. But some of the examples are arbitration on the blockchain. So that involves where you actually push pause essentially on enforcement of a blockchain, a smart contract, and you quick have an arbitrator determine the disputes with respect to that smart contract. Ideally, you would want an arbitrator who actually is an expert in that area. So if it has to do with shipping, you would have somebody who actually understands shipping, who would be on call to do essentially online arbitration to quickly decide that dispute. So we are talking about pretty much all ODR of some sort, online dispute resolution of some sort, the first of which is arbitration. An example is OpenBazaar. SageWise also used to be sort of leaning in that direction, but SageWise is no longer doing ODR. And in main part because smart contracts are just not sufficiently mature at this point. Crowdsourced dispute resolution, that's probably taken off the most. I'd say, Colin, wouldn't you? I mean, even since we last
Totally
talked about this, that's really become a thing. I mean, and a lot bigger thing than I think anyone even realized. And that's the idea of tokenized voting on the blockchain. I sort of joke, is it mob justice or gamification? But I kind of get it. Like, the idea is that you have other people who are engaged in the blockchain. So other people believe in the math, other people who are crypto economists most likely, but who are part of the community, who are then using their tokens in order to vote for who they think ought to win in a dispute regarding, for example, the veracity of a cryptocurrency. In fact, Claros is doing crowdsourced dispute resolution with respect to deciding whether certain new cryptocurrencies are valid or not. And in looking at it, in fact, I sat down with somebody with Claros and they were showing me how it actually works. And you know, it kind of makes a lot of sense. You submit your documents and the people who hold these tokens can then vote on who they think ought to win. And if they choose the winning side, they win tokens, right? And so you do have incentive to vote for the likely to win side, which is probably going to be the side that's got the most evidence that is on their side. So there is at least, of course, there's arguments that there can be a takeover of the tokens, there can be different ways that there can be gaming of the system. But again, they're trying to work against the gaming of the system, but there's always going to be a way to do that. But some other examples are Jur, Aragon, Delphi, Rhubarb, and more. So I'd say crowdsourced dispute resolution is kind of gaining a lot of steam in this world. Another idea that's been thrown out there is automated bot resolutions, right, using AI. And I could see that in the future. Currently, probably, I don't think the AI is sufficiently developed to really properly carry this out, but who knows, this could be the future because things change pretty quickly, as we all know. The question is, you know, are real dispute system design principles being considered? And when it comes to these principles, you have to think about the leaders. It's unclear who's going to take initiative and ensure quality control. There was a group, a consortium that was developing about a year ago, but that kind of fell apart. So it's unclear to me who the leaders are in the area. I don't know, what do you think, Colin? Do you have a sense of that, by the way?
Well, I don't think that the people in the cryptocurrency space who are really driving this right now, I think they don't know anything about dispute resolution. I mean, I've had some meetings with them. They do think about economics and game theory. They do think about, you know, combating gaming. But if you know, when you talk about DSD principles, like Jan Martinez has articulated these principles in her new book, or we talk about the iCoder principles, they're not thinking about that. I think they do want their system to be trusted, but, you know, the leaders who are driving this currently are not the same people who are at Cyberweek. And they probably should be. But once so that's my opinion.
You know, I think that's a really, and the funny thing is, you know, as it enters into more maturity and as we see more use of smart contracts in the world of, for example, shipping and other areas like that, you know, I think that's going to be really transformative in trying to figure out, okay, wait a minute, what do we need as the best kind of system, right? And so I think that is going to be very important, because then they will have to think about being part of Cyberweek and coming to ODR Forum, because some of these principles are going to matter to some of these big businesses that have a lot of money at stake.
Well, I give Amy Wan credit, because when she was building SageWise, she did reach out to those in the dispute resolution field. She wanted to engage in that conversation and learn about best practices in ODR. But unfortunately, as you said, SageWise pivoted. I think the Claros guys, they're definitely looking at ODR and dispute resolution. But a lot of these other guys, they're not. I mean, they just want to see if they can scale the system and, you know, see if there's any holes in their design. So, you know, you do name a key issue for us to think about.
Absolutely. Yeah, because I'd say at the end of the day, I do think there's a clear need for some kind of ODR to resolve smart contract disputes, especially as they get bigger and more robust and this matures, and we see areas like supply chain and shipping becoming major players. You know, and if that's true, there's going to be probably a need for really well-designed ODR to resolve these different disputes. You know, it'll be interesting to see, because definitely there's no way you can code for all possible breaches, and you're going to have to try to figure out, how do you maintain the ideas of anonymity and efficiency in the system? How do you bring in ethical design and execution? And it's not just based on the math. And what happens then? Application of iCoder principles and standards. I mean, I think these are all issues that are really sort of up for discussion. It's kind of a brave new world. Because again, I don't think it's sort of the bright, shiny new toy that's perfect for everything, but I do see some areas where smart contracts do make a lot of sense. You know, I mean, you can envision a world where we could eliminate trade wars because we have smart contracts that help us self-executing with, especially with shipping and some areas like that in international trade. You know, it's kind of funny, Colin, because I was thinking about just what's happening with even like a blockchain arbitration court, right? So like imagine this world where you have this blockchain arbitration court and you have these experts who really understand really what's going on with these smart contracts, right? The kind of person who could easily make a decision. You have them on call through kind of an online arbitration. And it brought me back to thinking about the history of arbitration itself. Because what's interesting is, arbitrations were used in international trade even during the Revolutionary War, because the courts were closed. And it was the only way that people could sort of have ongoing trade, and a way that was kind of apolitical, outside of the view of any particular state or any particular country, and was according to lex mercatoria, the law of the merchant. Maybe that will happen in the world of blockchain, right? So maybe we'll have some system that will be set up that essentially gives you an expert who can resolve these disputes in an online arbitration, maybe preceded by online mediation, just as we've seen now in the world of international with the Singapore Convention. There's a lot more international mediation as well. So we could even see a step process like this that's more not just based on the math, not just looking at game theory, but looking a little bit deeper into the best way to efficiently and ethically resolve these kind of disputes as they grow.
Totally. Yep. Well, I mean, I do think one of the things that Ethan has said for many years is the power of technology to resolve disputes is dwarfed by the power of technology to generate new disputes. And,
right.
Even in the vending machine, you're right. Everybody tells a vending machine story about explaining how smart contracts work.
Right.
Sometimes you put in your coins and the Twinkie falls against the glass and it doesn't come out. And there's going to be plenty of those, especially because as smart contracts scale, we're going to see a massive explosion in the volume of contracts. I mean, I agree with you. I'm not even sure if these are really contracts. It almost is like a metaphor more than it is the traditional notice, the traditional structure of a wet ink document, that's signed and kept in each other's, file cabinets. I mean, this, is every transaction on eBay, is that going to be a smart contract? I mean, I really think the real power of blockchain also comes not in the post-issue resolution process. It's actually in the pre-evidence gathering process. So as we engage in transactions, we used to say in e-commerce, somebody would buy 10 items, and then they would realize later that they bought 10. They said, oh, no, I only bought 5. And they say, well, on the website, you entered 10. They said, no, I didn't. I entered 5.
Yeah.
And we talked about, well, what if there was like a security camera that was actually recording what was going on every single time someone bought something on a website? So then they could go back to the tape and they could take a look and watch the person type in 10 and hit enter. Well, we never got to that point. We never got to the point where we're screen capturing every single transaction. But what if on every e-commerce platform, everywhere in the world, as they were making these orders, they were placing that into the blockchain and they were timestamping it. So later someone says, no, I ordered 5. I didn't order 10. And then you could go to the blockchain and it's unalterable. And you look at the timestamp and who put that information in there and it says 10.
Well, that's why,
say, there you go.
Yeah, like earlier, and I didn't go in too much depth about it, but that's why the evidentiary submissions via blockchain is really powerful, right?
Totally.
I mean, because then you can track exactly where that evidence was, exactly who handled it. Has it been mishandled in any way? That could really be a thing,
But the point is too, you don't even have to collect evidence because it's already collected. Everything is all collected and organized. It's almost like, maybe 1% of transactions generate a problem. So now we have a court case filed and we have to go out and get the evidence about the 1% of transactions. But now we're going to be collecting evidence on everything, even the cases that never go to court. And then if we ever have a case, we say, okay, let's go get the evidence, and it's already in the evidence cabinet. And
it
all
builds
organized.
Trust because it's there. So in the world of shipping, for example, if I can in real time know exactly what's happening with that shipment at any given moment, that builds a lot of trust where I don't need to have a letter of credit. I don't need to worry about these other auxiliary mechanisms because I've got that sort of transparency that's provided by the blockchain.
Well, and if I know that everything has been locked down and it's all in the blockchain, I'm not going to try and play games. I'm not going to come later and say, oh yeah, I ordered 5 when I know that I actually did order 10. Or even I will go out and look in the blockchain and say, oh yeah, I did order 10. So I don't even bother to file the dispute. But I do think that there's going to be way, way, way more disputes. And this opens up some very interesting wrinkles. I mean, these tools, if they really hit scale, and I think, 2 years ago, this was the hot topic, right? Smart
I know. Yeah.
Now I feel like machine learning and artificial intelligence is much hotter, because it's kind of a sexier thing. But what that means is also now it's becoming really mainstream. As you point out, all these companies are actually deploying these systems.
Oh, yeah.
Oracle is building this stuff, Chainlink, to make it possible to leverage these blockchains in everyday environments and smart contracts in everyday transactions. You know, if this really happens, this is a vision for the future of the law with no lawyers and no law and no
I know.
courts. I mean, it's radical what this could really be if it was spelled out.
Well,
So,
and the lawyers will figure out a way to like meddle. Here's why I say this, because it's funny. Well, no, it's true. There are states, you know, that are already passing laws when they don't even really know what it
they don't know
is.
what it
Like,
is.
they're
Yeah.
passing laws that say, well, they're enforceable in our state. And it's like, well, okay, what is it, right? So it's
Right.
sort of this idea that they want to get involved, which is actually funny because, you know, with the Federal Arbitration Act, that's what happened there is the lawyers wanted to have a say in arbitration.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that's kind of the history of how in 1925 that even was passed. So to me,
Wow.
that's kind of interesting of how the lawyers will find a way.
Well, I do think it's interesting that, you know, lawyers who are smart, if I was a young lawyer right now, I would get really smart about smart contracts, you know, because as this hits, if that's my expertise, I think that in the future, it's not going to be lawyers writing contracts and sending it to people for signatures. The computers are going to write and deploy the contracts, but the lawyers are going to have to program the computers. That's what it is. That's what's happened in medicine. That's what's happened in finance. Software is going to eat the law. So the question is, who's going to write the software? And that's the thing to do. If you're in the law and you want to, you know, benefit from these changes, you got to get ahead of them.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
A student asked me after class today, because we were talking about smart contracts and blockchain, and he's like, so what should I do? And it's like, you got to get out ahead of it. That was what I said, is you got to understand the stuff. You want to get into it. I think cybersecurity is an area where a lot of lawyers, really, there's going to be a lot of need for those lawyers who understand it and can get involved.
Right.
Can go across the street and actually talk to the folks in the computer sciences and understand what they're talking about.
That's what you're doing.
Yeah, that's important.
Yeah. No, but I mean, the other thing is you can get too far ahead of it, right? I think that's what SageWise did. They saw, oh, we're going to need ODR for smart contracts. And they went out and they built this service, but there's not enough smart contracts yet.
I know.
So they had to pivot because they had to find a place where they can get a sustainable market. So it's all about timing. But if this really hits and the timing is right, I think it's going to be huge. So,
yeah.
I mean, again, I think a lot of people, you're right. Most people, I think seeing this presentation is great because they hear these terms, smart contracts, blockchain, and they don't really know what it means. So I'm going to play this video over and over again.
Oh, yeah.
Explain.
I think
people.
though the part I think is the most interesting part of the story is learning about oracles and exactly how they provide vulnerability to the blockchain. To me, that is like a really important part of the story that I don't think comes out often when people are thinking about sort of how safe the blockchain is. And it's like, well, wait a minute, what's the data you're relying on, right? And so,
well, the other thing, again, you and I heard this too, there have now been some attempts to hack blockchains.
Oh, big time.
And you said before, these hashes that are, you know, unbelievably complicated. Well, we're about to have quantum computing. And then it may be that somebody actually could figure these things out.
Oh,
so we're gonna have, it's gonna have to be a moving target because as technology gets more capable, we need to make it harder to crack these systems. So
no, I can't even imagine. People are going to have like phones that have sufficient firepower to.
Right, exactly, to break 128, you know, bit encryption.
Hey, we laugh, but it's
coming.
You never know, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it's coming.
Well, thank you, sir.
No, Amy, that was great. Thank you. This is wonderful. This is a huge contribution to Cyberweek, and I'm going to put up the video and I'll share it in the agenda, and we'll probably discuss a lot of the things that you raise in the discussion forums and things like that. But I really appreciate it. This is great.
Well, and make sure to cut out any silly things that I've done.
No, I'm going to leave all of those in. That's the best. Actually,
Thanks.
when I did the recorded interview with Jean, there was one section where the video kind of messed up. So I took a still of her face and I put it over that video. And she's like, why did you put that Goonie still over my, and I was like, well, it's better than the corrupted video. But you didn't have any glitches as far as I know. So you're not going to get a Goonie still.
Well, and if in doubt, you can like have.
Oh no, don't do it. Oh gosh.
Do you know what this is?
Johnsonville brats? It
is a tiger/pig.
Oh my gosh. I knew this was going to devolve into a puppet show. I told you. All right, we better wrap this up before we embarrass ourselves.
Exactly. All right, have a good day.
All right, thank you so much, Amy. I appreciate it.
All right. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.